Grace and peace to you. Welcome to Sunday morning worship for August 28th, 2022. I'm Reverend Joe Kalis, the pastor at Peakland United Methodist Church in Lynchburg, Virginia. All are welcome. In our gospel passage this morning, Jesus is having supper with the Pharisees, a group of folks that are usually in great disagreement with Jesus, and yet here he is breaking bread with them. What a powerful model for us today in our fractious world, sharing a meal and spending time with those with whom we disagree. Jesus does take this opportunity to teach the Pharisees about humility and empathy. As we today hear the story, perhaps there will be a lesson for us about humility and empathy. Let's begin our worship together with these words. I'll read the regular print, and you can join in with the bold print. Creator God, you call us to hospitality and to give as generously to others as you have given to us. For there are angels among us. Loving God, you call us to give you glory in the compassion we show to one another, to love without judgment of ourselves or of others. We gather as one body, seeking to walk in the way you have set for us. We gather as one body to worship the one who is love. Our gospel passage is from Luke, chapter 14, verses 1 and 7 through 14. On one occasion, when Jesus was going to the house of a leader of the Pharisees to eat a meal on the Sabbath, they were watching him closely. When Jesus noticed how the guests chose the places of honor, he told them a parable. When you are invited by someone to a wedding banquet, do not sit down at the place of honor in case someone more distinguished than you has been invited by your host, and the host who invited both of you may come and say to you, "Give this person your place." And then in disgrace you would start to take the lowest place. But when you are invited, go and sit down at the lowest place, so that when your host comes, he may say to you, "Friend, move up higher." Then you will be honored in the presence of all who sit at the table with you. For all who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted. He said also to the one who had invited him, "When you give a luncheon or a dinner, do not invite your friends or your brothers or your relatives or rich neighbors, in case they may invite you in return and you would be repaid. But when you give a banquet, invite the poor, the crippled, the lame, and the blind, and you will be blessed, because they cannot repay you. For you will be repaid at the resurrection of the righteous." This is the gospel of Jesus Christ. Where are you sitting right now? Where are you sitting? Are you sitting in your chair? Does everyone in your household or everyone who comes to your house know that's your chair? My chair in my home is in the front living room. My wife's chair is the recliner. Those are our chairs. Are you sitting in your chair right now? Excellent. Get up and move. Right now, get up out of your chair and move to a new place. If you're driving while you're listening to this, do not move your seat. You stay put. Everyone else, let's go. I'm going to move too. On the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. Still with me? Good. This is the Underground, a space here at Peakland for our youth. This was the place that I had my first meal with the church staff when I became pastor here. We've got our next meal together in a couple of weeks. I'm preparing a pasta dish with homemade tomato sauce and olive oil infused with basil and garlic. It is so good. I'm eager to share the meal with the staff. As I said in our gospel passage, Jesus is sharing a meal with the Pharisees, and he's eating at the home of a very important Pharisee, and Jesus notices how the guests are behaving. Each guest seeks out the place of honor at the table. Everyone wants the best seat in the house, nearest the host, and reserved for the distinguished guests, while the lesser seats for the lesser people are farther from the host. Jesus sees this playing out, and he tells two stories. First, Jesus says, "Don't pick the best seat, lest your host must humiliate you by asking you to move down. Pick the lower seat, and let the host honor you and move you up." Jesus says, "For those who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted." And then Jesus says, when you have a lunch or a dinner, don't invite your friends or your really rich relatives or rich neighbors or any of those who can pay you back. Give a banquet for the poor and the lame and the blind who have no hope of repaying you, because as Jesus says, for then you will be blessed at the resurrection. Now, these kind of social maneuvers seem bizarre to us in modern America. We don't have those rigid seating assignments at parties based on levels of honor. But we absolutely do assign the status and worth of a person based on what job a person holds, what kind of car they drive, where they live, what clothes they wear to church, and where their kids and grandkids got accepted at university. We assign status and worth to other people all the time. When the Peakland Church staff and I share a meal together, it's potluck, and we all contribute to the meal. In the gospel story, Jesus warns us against sharing meals and spending time with folks with the expectation that they will be willing and able to repay us for our generosity to them. I'm not sure that happens to us today, but we absolutely do mostly associate with those who are mostly already like us. We spend time with folks who are more or less at the same economic level as we are and have more or less the same education levels as we have. And we mostly associate with those who have more or less similar political and religious views as we have. We associate mostly with people just like us. Jesus' stories are challenges to us. He's not really talking about dinner party behavior, but about our heartfelt values and how we treat others in everyday life. He doesn't say the actual words here in the passage, but humility and empathy are the values Jesus wants for us. Humility and empathy. Jesus' first story about seats of honor did happen for me when I was a 26-year-old newly minted associate pastor at Williamsburg United Methodist Church in Williamsburg, Virginia. I was part of a large church staff, very much like the one here at Peakland, and we organized a lunch for ourselves at the Williamsburg Inn, top-notch dining in the heart of colonial Williamsburg. The dining room had, apparently, a dress code, which I did not know about. The staff lunch was right after Sunday worship, so I was wearing a shirt and tie, but since I had worn my clergy robe in worship, I wasn't wearing a suit jacket or a sport coat, which was, as I was about to find out, required for dining at the Williamsburg Inn. The church staff and I go into the dining room, and we are all seated without any problem. And we are seated deep in the dining room, all the way across from where you enter. We're sitting at our table, looking at the menu, and then a restaurant staffer comes over, the clothing cop, and he announces to the whole table that I am not appropriately dressed. I have to leave the table and follow him across the entire dining room in my non-sport coat shame to the clothing jail, where they issue me a Linder dress coat. So then I can walk back across the dining room wearing my shame coat. I have no idea what I ate for lunch at the Williamsburg Inn, but I hope I ordered a gooey dessert and spilled it all over my shame jacket. I share my humiliation with you because there is a difference between humility, which is a good virtue, and humiliation, which Jesus is not endorsing here. Jesus does not want any of us to feel humiliation and shame, not in a restaurant, not in a church, and not in life. Jesus invites us to embrace humility, which is a freedom from arrogance and freedom from pomposity. I read a good definition of humility a few years ago. Humility is not thinking less of yourself. Humility is thinking of yourself less. That's a subtle wordplay with a mild, wide distinction. Humility is not thinking less of yourself. Shame and humiliation come from thinking less of yourself. No shame, no humiliation here at church. No shame and no humiliation in life. Humility means thinking of yourself less often so that we can think of others more often. Preaching about humility carries some risks. Those of us who have an abundance of humility often think that we need more. Folks who seem to live their lives free of humility rarely think they need any humility. Rule of thumb: if you think you are a person who needs more humility in your life, probably you don't. If, when it comes to humility, you are thinking of all those other people in your life who really need to be much more humble, then maybe do a little more self-examination. For us United Methodists, there are no seats of honor and there are no seats of shame in this church. All are welcome. Wear whatever clothing you feel works best for you. Whatever work you do, whatever car you drive, wherever you live, you are welcome at Peakland. You can be rich as a Midas or poor as a church mouse, and Jesus himself bids you welcome here at Peakland Church. Whether you are a member of this church or any church, Jesus bids you welcome here. And next week, when we have communion at his table, all are welcome. If you seek to follow Christ, if you want to be in right relationship with God and with the world around you, then you have a place here in this community. We are all beloved guests of honor, and we are all offered God's immense love and grace. Our worship together and our church life together are all meant to foster humility, to encourage us to think of ourselves less often and to think more often of others. The challenge will be to take the lesson here and apply it to our lives beyond church and beyond worship. In our passage, Jesus ate with the Pharisees, and this was the third time in the Gospel of Luke that he was eating with them, with folks who completely disagreed with everything he taught and believed. Why would Jesus do that? Why would Jesus subject himself to unpleasant people who disagreed with him? Why wouldn't Jesus just blow them off and dismiss those who rejected him? Isn't that the way our world works? You are either with me or against me. Us versus them. No middle ground, no nuance. Life is a zero-sum game. If someone else is getting something, then I must be losing something. That's the way the world works. That's the way we work most of the time, but darn it, that's not the way Jesus works. Jesus keeps hanging out with folks he disagrees with. Jesus genuinely cares for the Pharisees even as he disagrees with them. They consider Jesus an enemy and a threat, but he does not consider them enemies or threats. At this church, God sees us as we are, wonderfully created and full of potential for goodness and very much in need of mercy and kindness. We need God's love. We need God's mercy, and God is ready to give us what we need. Out in the world, Jesus invites us to see one another as God sees us. Jesus invites us to avoid evaluating everyone around us for what they can do for us or whether they are with us or against us, but to recognize how wonderfully created and full of potential and in need of mercy and kindness everyone else is too. That requires empathy. That requires us to see the full humanity in a person who may not look like us or speak the languages we do. Empathy enables us to see the God-blessed wonderfulness in everyone around us, whoever they are, whatever they're wearing, whatever they're driving, and wherever they live. Humility helps us recognize our own sacred worth and our need for God's grace. Empathy helps us recognize the sacred worth and the need for God's grace in those around us. Right now, you are sitting in a different place. It's not your usual place. You're looking at things in a slightly new way. Do that again and again and again in the days to come. In school, at the lunch table, who is sitting with you? Who is not? Who could be with you? Invite them. Welcome them. At work, at home, at church, who is someone who seems to be the opposite of everything you believe in and practice? Ask yourself, what does the world look like for them? Jesus says, those who are humbled will be exalted. Those who embrace humility, thinking of yourself less often and thinking of others more often, those who do that will be exalted and live a blessed life. Jesus says, when we look at others not with an eye for payback, but with empathy and common humanity, then right living will be ours. Thanks be to God.
Though I may speak with bravest eye, and have the gift to all inside, and have not love, my words are vain as sounding brass and hopeless gain. Though I may give all I possess, and striving so my love profess, but not begin my love within, the prophet soon turns strangely thin. Come, Spirit, come, our hearts control, our spirits long to be made whole. Let inward love guide every deed. By this we worship and are free.
Every week, we like to lift up one of our homebound members in prayer, as a reminder that even if they are unable to gather with us in person, they are still a valued and cherished member of our community. Our homebound members this week are John and Lois Hansen, and I hope you'll join me in praying for them throughout the course of the week. We also like to share one of the ways that we will continue to be in ministry in this coming week, and this week we have a little bit of an announcement for you. You may have heard Pastor Joe say in one of his Thursday devotions that we are going to be moving into doing online communion, which means that Pastor Joe will sit at this table where I am, and there will be some kind of video to help you participate in communion together. We encourage you to look for emails from Pastor Joe and for videos with more information about that coming up. I also want to let you know that this coming Sunday there will be a change in our Sunday morning bulletins for our in-person worship services. We're just making a couple of small tweaks to allow us to experience worship in new and abounding ways. Will you join me in prayer? Holy, loving God, thank you for the opportunity to gather. We are grateful for the ways that communication has expanded in our lives to allow us to be with each other, even if we are not physically with each other. We ask that you would be with us, be with those on our hearts and minds, be with our homebound. Inspire us to look for new ways to be with you, to embody your love, compassion, and justice in this world. It's in your holy and unending name that we pray. Amen.
Receive these good words of benediction. In the days to come, welcome all to your table. Practice empathy and humility. Love God and walk in God's ways. May the way we live offer praise to our one Trinity God.